Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Changing the Future. Redone. By the Patient One. 1 year after fulfilling their dreams, the Straw Hat Pirates are given the chance to save something they lost by being sent back in time. Who are they going to save? How will the past Straw Hats react to the future ones? And how insanely will the past be changed? Adios.
In stark contrast to the moderate temperature that they just left, the light faded this time, leaving the Straw Hats in a forest covered in snow. It came as a welcome surprise to the Straw Hats that their black outfits insulated them nicely from the cold. All except one, but his attention was oceans away from considering that. Yes, it's my turn. I'd know this forest anywhere. Wait a minute. This is the forest on the peak of the Drum Rockies, where the castle is. But what are we doing here? Chopper asked, his joy fading into confusion. What do you mean, Chopper? Luffy asked. The day Doctor died, he drank a soup I made out of a miyudake mushroom. It was poisonous. I thought that the skull and crossbones next to it in the book was a Jolly Roger. I was so stupid, but the point is that if we were going to stop me from doing that, we should be back at Doctor's house, which is at the foot of the mountains. Well, you can cure a miyudake now, right? Usopp asked. Yeah. Ever since I found the cure, I've never let it out of my backpack. I'd never forgive myself if someone else died from that mushroom and I couldn't help them. And I wouldn't really have any trouble stabilizing Doctor's other condition, either, but he was facing down Wapol when he died. Chopper's eyes lit up. That must be it. We're here to save Doctor along with everyone else in the kingdom by overthrowing Wapol. Oh, this is going to be fun to watch, Zoro said, smirking dangerously. What do you mean, watch, Mosshead? Do you not plan on fighting? Sanji asked. It'd be nice, sure, but I think Chopper can handle all of them himself. Chopper blinked, but then grinned, along with everyone else, as they realized what Zoro was implying. The reindeer removed his backpack, however, and dug in it for a moment before handing Sanji a vial and what looked like one of his rumble balls. Make sure Doctor drinks the vial first. That pill is designed to get rid of his illness, not the miyudake. It could probably handle both, but I'm not taking any chances. Got it, Doctor, Sanji said with a completely serious expression. And Luffy, go down the mountain and bring Doctorine up here. Otherwise, I don't think I'll get a chance to see her before we leave. Got it, Chopper, Luffy said before vanishing. Are you sure that's a good idea, Chopper? Sending Luffy to get her? Zoro asked. For once, I agree with Mosshead. Luffy's not exactly careful with things like that. You may be right. Is it silly of me to have thought that Luffy would still be scared of Doctorine, so he'd be careful with her? Sanji thought back to the time that he first met Chopper's mentor, and paled as he remembered her chasing him through the castle while throwing weapons at him. I see your point, Chopper. But I'm not sure Luffy would have enough good sense not to just grab her and rocket up to the top of the mountain. Chopper shrugged, and then sniffed the air before his eyes narrowed. It's too late to do anything about it now. All right, this one's mine. The rest of you, make sure Doctor doesn't get hurt. Everyone nodded, and put on their hoods as they followed Chopper towards the edge of the forest. Before the castle of Drum Kingdom sat its tyrannical king Wapol on the back of his steed, a large woolly hippo. Flanking him was a small army of royal soldiers with rifles raised, a group of 20 men in pink smocks, and a man with a green woolly outfit who was bound to serve the king. All of these faced a man with a cross-shaped hairdo, with dark circles beneath his eyes from the poison coursing through his body, who had just been informed that the 20 doctors he had come to save were alive and well, and it was merely a trap to kill him. So that was it, Hirulik said, falling to his knees. Thank God, and none of them are sick. Dalton, the sole member of the king's guards who had his morals straight, stiffened as he saw the doctor begin to cry tears of joy. I was afraid that this was a national crisis. But no, luckily it was just a trick, Hirulik said. Members of the 20 MDs, the 20 doctors that served Wapol out of necessity, began to have the same reaction as Dalton. If it really was a national crisis, I wouldn't want someone like you, Wapol gloated, before commanding his soldiers, ignore his babbling, execute him. Save your bullets, Hirulik said, raising a hand. You don't have what it takes to kill someone like me. Waipol's face contorted in confusion, and the soldiers refrained from firing as Hirulik continued. Hey, when do you think a person dies? When a bullet from a pistol pierces his heart? No, when he's attacked by an incurable disease? No, when he eats a soup of deadly poisonous mushrooms? No, a man dies when people forget him. Dalton gritted his teeth as the doctor poured a cup of one of his chemicals. Even if I should disappear right now, my dream will come true. And when it does, the citizen's sickness of the heart will be cured as well. You're crying, why, Dalton? The royal guard had tears streaming down his cheeks as he choked out. Is that true for a country? Yeah, if the will to do it is passed on, Hirulik responded. Come on, Dalton. Why are you crying? Wapol cackled, oblivious to the thought that one of his most loyal soldiers was gaining the resolve to stand up to him. Very shortly, a monster will be coming. He's my son. Please, don't hurt him, Hirulik said. He felt blood trickle out of his mouth, and his vision slowly began fading as he looked down into his cup, preparing to shout his last words to all who could hear and ensure that he did not die at his son's hand. Just as he opened his mouth to shout, the ground beneath him began to quake, causing some of the formula to spill on the snow. The quakes grew stronger and stronger at a fast pace, and in spite of himself, Hirulik put aside his thoughts of drinking the chemicals, and looked around. His jaw hit the ground as he saw a tremendous shadow coming from the forest nearby. What is that thing? One of the guards demanded. Wapol was looking in shock as well. It's a monster. Shoot it, Wapol demanded. The soldiers did not need telling twice, and they began firing their rifles, giving no more consideration to the rogue doctor. Only Dalton spared enough attention to Hirulik to notice as a figure in a black cloak appeared next to him, knocking the cup from his hand before forcing a vial into it. If you have any care for your son, then drink that, now. It's the cure for immune decay, the figure hissed. Hirulik blinked in shock, but with the development of the current situation, it seemed he had no choice if he was to make sure he didn't die from the mushroom. He downed the contents of the vial, and looked at the figure with curiosity, only to have his response cut off as he held out a yellow pill. Our doctor spent years working on this. Eat this, and swallow every bit of it, it will cure your disease. Hirulik looked at the pill, his mouth still open some, and marveled as his vision slowly began to clear. He wiped a trickle of blood from his mouth before taking the pill and biting it. It broke into bitter pieces, and he struggled to swallow it all, but managed it in the end. The figure got up from beside him, and turned away. Dr. Hirulik, your own actions have brought you this cure. Pay attention to what's going on, and you'll see your life's work realized, he said quietly. His attention gained, Hirulik turned his rapidly returning sight to the castle's front, where he saw a sight to make his jaw drop to the snow once more. Dalton had little time to reflect on the figure that was talking to Hirulik before he refocused on the monster that was coming closer. It was a massive figure, 10 times his height, with what looked like black cloth covering his entire form aside from his head, which seemed to be that of a demonic reindeer. A long muzzle with a blue nose, massive antlers, and a pair of glowing red eyes. On top of his head sat a pink hat beneath a blue cap, but that did nothing to make the monster less terhen. It became clear that the guns had been emptied and the monster showed no indication of being wounded. Dalton thought of the words that Hirulik had just spoken, and his eyes widened as he somehow found the strength to speak. Are you Hirulik's son? The monster looked at him, and its eyes faded to reveal black irises. The look on his face was almost gentle as it replied. Yes. I'm here to save my father, it rumbled in a low voice. Then it turned its attention to Wapol, and its eyes lit up with hatred again, unbothered by the fact that the tyrant was sweating bullets. Your rule is over, Wapol, the monster rumbled. GGG guards, kill it, kill it, kill it. If guns don't work, use your swords. Instinctually, all of the guards hesitated, their primitive lizard brains screaming giant monster. But when the monster made no move to attack, they charged forward, aiming for the beast's shrouded legs. I won't hurt you if you don't give me a reason to. The charge hiccuped but didn't falter. The monster, slowly and almost with reluctance, raised one giant hand and slammed it upon the ground just before the guards would have reached him. The resulting force sent the nearest ones flying and half buried the remainder in snow, The charge broken, the monster spoke again. "Stand down, or I'll have to send you all the way." Then he moved, dashing forward and pushing against the soldier-filled snow with all the force of a stampede. With a final shove, he sent them flying. Nearly to the edge. The soldiers were mere inches away from falling off of the mountain to certain death down below. He had deliberately spared them, they realized. He could have killed them but left them alive. At the same time, they couldn't stand down against the king's orders. So, to a man, they did the only thing they could to preserve their lives both ways. That is, nothing. They simply feigned being unconscious. Much to Waipal's panic. "Get up, you idiots! Get up and protect!" Wapol looked back at the monster to see him approaching with deliberate slowness. A predator after his prey, it seemed. "Dalton, Chess, Kuromarimo. Get rid of him." A man with a frowny face and jester outfit moved before Wapol immediately. Another man with an afro and a grin that seemed more like a grimace beside him. "You're up against the strongest fighters on this island, monster. Don't think you're getting away," Kuromarimo declared. "You'll never lay a hand on King Wapol as long as we live," Chess agreed, knocking arrows in his bow. The monster didn't stop, or slow, or even visibly react to the threat. Gulping audibly, Chess loosed his arrows, Kuromarimo tossing sticky hairballs along with them. The projectiles struck true, and did absolutely nothing. The balls didn't slow down the monster an iota. The arrows dug in, and for a moment Wapol and his two lieutenants felt a glimmer of hope. That hope died screaming when one of the arrows fell out of the beast's fur, revealing that it had simply gotten entangled in the thick pelt. "Ah!" Chess screamed, backpedaling frantically and loosing arrow after arrow. "Get away, get away, get away!" Kuromarimo, possessed of either more courage or less good sense than his compatriot, sprouted spikes from his gloves and charged into melee. Roaring, he reared back his fist, only to get swallowed up by the monster's giant palm and lifted up into the air. "Go cool your head," it rumbled, before tossing Kuromarimo with considerable force into the largest snowbank around. There was a sound not unlike a ringing bell, and he slumped, unconscious, from his head striking the large chunk of ice hidden by the snowbank. That done, the monster continued its inexorable advance to the castle gates which slammed shut right behind Chess. The man took this about as well as he could have. "What? No, my liege, please, open up," Chess wailed, abandoning his bow to pound on the gates. Abruptly, the sun stopped shining on him, and he turned around to find the monster looming over him, soulless eyes boring into his own. Faced, alone, with his own impending doom, Chess did the only sensible thing. He fainted. The monster tilted its head quizzically. "Huh?" Leaning over, it picked up Chess' insensate form and carefully tossed it over to where Kuromarimo was still unconscious. Standing straight, it eyed the castle, as if pondering the best way to pry it open. Mahahahahaha. It peered up, finding Wapol on the battlements, bristling with weaponry from swords to heavy cannon. "Fool!" Wapol crowed bombastically. "You should have killed me when you had the chance. Now that I have absorbed the castle's armory through the power of the munch fruit, there's no chance you'll get into this castle alive. Mahahahahaha." The monster, in response to this rant, said nothing. For a malignant narcissist like Wapol, this was about the cruelest thing the monster could have done. "Say something, damn it. I gave the rest a chance to give themselves up," the monster rumbled. "But I'll enjoy hurting you." Waipal's jaw fell open at the naked threat. I am the king. Know your history." And, moving with speed that it had not shown before, that should have been impossible for a body so large, the monster clapped its hands together, with Wapol in the middle. The collapse of metal and weaponry was more than even he himself could have healed. The tyrant's life was over. Withdrawing his hands, the monster stared with pity and a bit of sadness at the corpse. "I still haven't found the cure for a black heart. If only I had, maybe you could have turned things around." Hirulik, Dalton, the 20 MDs, and the soldiers looked in shock and horror as the monster turned back towards them. His eyes fell on the only soldier of the king who hadn't raised his weapon. "Dalton, it's time that you decided. Where do your loyalties lie?" The man forced down his shock at the situation as he thought of Waipal's father and Hirulik, men that had their hearts in the right place for this kingdom. He looked up at the monster with a determined expression and then turned to the remaining royal soldiers as they deemed it safe to stop feigning unconsciousness. I've seen the path this country should take. With Wapol gone, it can finally receive the care that it needs. If any of you remain loyal to that fool, then step up now, and I'll be your opponent. The royal soldiers looked between the half-bison that they knew was far above them in strength, and the monster that was leering down at them that had defeated Wapol with one clap of his hands. As one, they dropped their weapons to the ground. At that point, Hirulik finally staggered forward, looking at the monster with a look of shock. Chopper? He managed. The monster turned to look at him, and tears filled his eyes. The next moment, he slowly began to shrink, his black outfit changing size with him. In only a matter of seconds, the monster had shrunk into the size of a human child. The monstrous reindeer's face changed to a face reminiscent of a raccoon dog. This small figure stumbled forward, crying more heavily than Dalton himself had been only a few minutes before as he fell into Hirulik's embrace. Doctor, I'm so happy you're all right," he choked out through his sobs, his voice now high-pitched like a child's. Dalton observed the scene with no small amount of curiosity before something else caught his eye. Coming up from the rope that led down to the bottom was another small, teary-eyed, raccoon dog-like creature, seemingly much younger, obviously much more bandaged, and in absence of a blue cap on top of his pink one. Still, Dalton could easily guess that it was the same creature, and he looked between the two before turning back in the direction of the figure he had seen earlier, only to see 9 instead of 1, all of varying sizes, and all with their bodies and faces hidden beneath black robes. "Could someone please explain what the hell is going on here?" Dalton shouted, his exasperation at not understanding the situation finally getting the beture. Hugging the doctor slowly pushed himself away, and the other one approached him, curiosity creeping over his face in place of the tears. As Hirulik noticed this, he glanced between the two as well, and put a hand to his head. "Am I still sick? I'm seeing 2 choppers here. How are there 2 choppers here?" I'm from the future, doctor," said the one with the blue cap. Dalton, Hirulik, and the younger chopper looked at him attentively. He swallowed, but continued. "In my time, you died today, and I started studying under Dr. Kureha. She taught me everything she knew about medicine. After 6 years, a powerful pirate crew called the Blackbeard Pirates attacked the country. Wapol didn't even try to fight them. As soon as he found out how strong they were, he took all of his soldiers and ran away. Dalton, you took command of the country and started to rebuild it, and you did a good job, and Doctorine and I moved into the castle. The country was recovering around the time that the Straw Hat Pirates arrived here. The Straw Hats weren't your normal kind of pirates. They only came here because one of their crewmates was horribly sick. They begged to be let into the island, and you allowed it." The captain climbed the drum rockies with his bare hands to get his crewmate to the doctor, and that was about the time that Wapol found his way back and tried to reclaim his throne. But when he got to the top of the mountain, the captain defeated him and sent him flying far away from here. The crew talked me into joining them as their doctor, and I set out to sea. It was 11 years from now that my captain, Monkey D. Luffy, became king of the pirates, and I discovered the secret of the panacea. I've become the greatest doctor in the world, a doctor that can cure any disease, and it's all thanks to you, doctor. That's why I came back here. An old man that my crew met let each of us go back in time to save someone we lost before. If you took the medicine, then you're all better. You won't die, and you can live to see your dream come true." Chopper finished, smiling and crying at the same time. Hirulik, Dalton, and the young Chopper slowly digested the story. Then Hirulik reached forward and grabbed both Choppers, pulling them close and hugging them tightly to his chest. "I'm so proud of you, Chopper." The younger of the 2 reindeer found it a little odd to be thanked for something that he hadn't done yet, but nonetheless found himself tearing up at hearing that praise from his father. Older Chopper, meanwhile, was crying his eyes out. The soldiers and MDs looked on curiously. Dalton stared with an unreadable expression as he took in the reality of what would have been were it not for these pirates from the future. The other 8 members of the crew looked on without removing their hoods, allowing their crewmate an uninterrupted reunion with his father. Or at least, that's what they planned on, up until the point where there was a crash nearby, sending up a small cloud of snow. Following this, they could hear a woman's voice spouting a stream of invective from the middle of the cloud. Chopper winced as he separated from his father again. And Hirulik had a similar expression. Younger Chopper looked in apprehension while his future self turned towards the other figures. "You were right, Sanji. I shouldn't have had Luffy get doctoring," he groaned. Many of the cloaked figures shook their heads as they approached where the snow was clearing the way to reveal an old woman with a youthful-looking body throttling another cloaked figure. "You stupid brat, what the hell are you playing at, sending us flying like that? Are you trying to get us killed?" she screeched, looking positively murderous. "Sorry, doctoring. I asked him to bring you up here," Chopper said. The woman turned around, opening her mouth to begin shouting at him as well. But her voice died in her throat as she saw that the speaker was significantly different from the reindeer that had left her several minutes before, who was currently standing a short distance behind him, next to a distinctly not dead Hirulik. Her mouth remained open for several seconds more in a gape. Then she slowly closed her mouth, and looked at the reindeer close to her with a small frown. "All right, so what exactly is going on here?" Hirulik, Kureha, young Chopper, Dalton, the 20 MDs, and many of the soldiers listened attentively as Chopper told them his story more thoroughly. Hirulik's death, Dalton's rebellion, his apprenticeship under Kureha, the invasion of the country, its reformation under Dalton, the Straw Hat Pirates' arrival, the permanent end to Waipal's tyranny, the birth of the Sakura Kingdom, and his crew's success in reaching their dreams. The tale enraptured all who heard it, and many of them took to memorizing the names and faces of those who would succeed Gold Roger in only a few years. Monkey D. Luffy, the grinning, black-haired young man with a scar under one eye who would be the king. Roronoa Zoro, the green-haired, one-eyed young man who would succeed Dracula Mahawk. Nami, the orange-haired young woman who would succeed in navigating the most monstrous ocean in the world. Usopp, the black-haired, long-nosed young man who was worthy of the title, King of Snipers. Sanji, the blonde-haired, swirly-eyebrowed chef who would prove the existence of the legendary All Blue. Nico Robin, the black-haired woman who would expose the dark history of the world government. Frankie, the robotic shipwright who would build a ship as formidable as the Oro Jackson. Brook, the skeletal musician whose abilities were worthy of the title, Soul King. Jinbei, the fishman who they knew today as a warlord. And Tony Chopper, the reindeer that ate the human fruit that became the world's best doctor. Young Chopper found himself awestruck from everything and everyone that they described. Kureha had a slight smirk as she considered the fact that she would raise with her own hands the one who would prove her wrong about there being no medicine that could cure all diseases. And Hirulik was crying tears of joy. "Chopper, you've grown up to be so strong. You fulfilled all of my dreams and then some. I couldn't be prouder of you," he said fervently. "I guess I should say that I'm proud of you too, Chopper. But how am I supposed to keep my job if you're here with the knowledge of the panacea?" Kureha asked Riley. Chopper smiled sadly. "You don't have to worry about that, doctoring. The old man told us that we can only stay in each time period for an hour. We don't have much time left, and whatever we change here won't change anything in our time. But I want to ask you to teach me what you can tell me about medicine, and make the Sakura Kingdom into the thriving medical country that it should be." Kureha stared at the small reindeer for a few minutes with an unreadable expression, then she smirked. "Well, how can I refuse my superior?" she asked Riley. Chopper blushed and grinned, and began dancing. Shut up. You were the one who taught me everything you knew about medicine. You shouldn't be complimenting me, he said, fooling nobody into thinking that he wasn't unusually happy about the compliment. "Not very good at hiding his emotions, is he?" Kureha asked Hirulik dryly. "Wow, that's weird. That's exactly what I said the first time I met Chopper," Nami said. "And what the rest of the crew said when he joined us," Zoro added. Young Chopper was looking at his older self curiously. "Does it really make you that happy?" he asked. The older reindeer stopped and looked at him, still smiling. "Doctoring hardly ever gave me compliments," he explained, but then his smile turned a bit sad. "But besides that, in my time, I grew up being called a monster by everyone except doctoring. I always tried not to feel happy when humans complimented me." "To no avail," Jinbei said, provoking chuckles all around. "But you've got a chance now to earn a place where you belong before you meet Luffy and the others. It won't be easy, but at least give it a try, Chopper Sias." Younger Chopper looked uncertain, and Dalton spoke up. "Chopper, is it? I'll help make sure that everyone treats you the way that they should, he promised. And why shouldn't they? It's all thanks to Chopper that this country can finally rebuild itself, Hirulik said proudly. Then he looked back at the older reindeer. Speaking of which, how did you turn into that giant? In short order, Chopper found himself explaining everything he could about Rumble Balls, including showing off all of his forms. Kureha and Hirulik were obviously fascinated at his discovery, and Dalton, as a zone himself, was expressing just as much interest. Younger Chopper, on the other hand, was growing more acquainted with the Straw Hat Pirates. All of them seemed nice, even Zoro, who Chopper was at first as scared of as Brook. But the swordsman seemed surprisingly gentle to Chopper, and the end result was him eagerly awaiting being able to meet with this crew in the future. As the time for the crew to depart drew nearer, many of the soldiers, at Chopper's request and Dalton's command, brought all of the castle's cannons out onto the mountaintop, while the 20 MDs retrieved the research from Dr. Hiruluk's laboratory, at the same time informing the country of the situation. Chess and Kuromarimo were bound and imprisoned, and the flag atop the castle was replaced with Hiruluk's Jolly Roger. It was more work than they anticipated duplicating the experiment's results, but the cannons found themselves loaded just as the 10 pirates began to shine. The reindeer rushed to hug his father one last time. "I'm so glad I made you proud, father," Chopper said. Hirulik teared up all over again, and held the future version of his son close. "My son, thank you for everything. I promise you that you'll become a fine doctor again," the man whispered. Younger Chopper watched from a short distance, and his eyes hardened. "I promise that, too, older me. I'll make you proud, or make me proud?" he asked, the seriousness fading before confusion. His older self chuckled. "I'd rather not think about it, it's too confusing, but I know you'll do great, Chopper." The younger reindeer beamed, and the older one stepped back to stand beside his crew just as the cannons fired. And as the light winked out, the pirates going with it, the Sakura Kingdom was born. A peaceful, quiet, and significantly less cold forest greeted the Straw Hats when the light faded. They were in rather deep, unable to see what island they were on without using haki. A quick check with that skill indicated the nearest civilization, and a minute later found them at the edge of a peaceful village. Nami perked up when she recognized the houses and people there. "Kokoyashi, it's my turn. I can save Belle Mere," Nami said euphorically. "All right, so, when exactly are we?" Zoro asked. "Well, this has to be the day that Arlong first arrived, but it looks like he's not here yet, otherwise, the village would be a lot more unsettled. So, shall we intercept him at the coast before he has the chance to do anything?" Jinbei asked. Nami pondered over the idea, but then sighed and shook her head. "No, we'll have to let things go the way they did before for a little while. Let's head to my house for now," she said, walking in a certain direction in the forest. The crew fell into step behind her. Even Zoro managed to stay with them. Perhaps it was just remembering Nami's pleading expression when she turned to them out of desperation to help with Arlong. Money-grubbing witch though she was still a crewmate. He never wanted to see that look on her face again. Jinbei seemed to be exceptionally tense as they moved. While it was Nami's choice to come to this particular time, he couldn't help but feel guilt at what was about to come to pass. If he had heard so much as a whisper that Arlong was up to something like this, he would have avenged Nami himself and made sure Arlong regretted what he had done. Brother or not, his actions were inexcusable, and Jinbei was directly responsible for it all. And he would never forgive himself if this intervention went awry. A few minutes of walking later, the crew's haki picked up terror coming from the village that they had left. Jinbei stopped walking, and after a moment, the crew looked back at him. "Nami, it's your choice what we do, but why are we not preventing Arlong and his followers from entering the island?" he asked. It could not have been clearer that it was taking every measure of control he had not to run back to the village. The navigator sighed. "I appreciate how you feel about this, Jinbei. But the day Arlong came to the island, Belle Mere and I got into a fight, and I said I wished I had been adopted by a rich mother. That was when Genzo first told me of how Belle Mere had adopted me and Nijiko. I barely reconciled with her before Arlong killed her, and I've never forgiven myself for having most of the last words she said to us being apologies for not being rich," she said quietly. She removed her hood to wipe her eyes, and then spoke with more determination. "Before I save Belle Mere, I want my younger self to have it hammered home just how important she is to us, and weird to her. If she's getting this second chance, I'm not going to let her make the mistake I did ever again. Jinbei relaxed visibly. I understand, he replied. Nami replaced her hood, and they walked for another minute or so before coming to the edge of the woods, where a small house and tangerine grove could be seen. A delicious smell wafted through the air. Duck, stew, and tangerine sauce, a veritable banquet for a small family. Luffy forced himself not to drool, even as his stomach growled. The others on the crew looked at him as they heard the sound, and though their faces were hidden, Luffy could feel them leering. Hey, all of that training we gave ourselves made me hungry, it's not my fault, he whined. Can you at least try to keep it under control until this is over? Sanji hissed. I'm trying, it's not like I don't know how important this is. Luffy snapped, and the indignant tone he used seemed to mollify the crew, who turned back to the house. They waited for a minute more before Arlong and his crew approached the house, and opened the door. A rude greeting came a minute later as Bell-Mir delivered a roundhouse kick to the fishman's jaw, and pinned him to the ground with a rifle in his mouth. My, you seem to have inherited your mother's temper, Nami, Robin observed. Nami couldn't help but beam, but that didn't last long as Arlong bit the rifle in half and attacked, smashing her mother's arm into a bloody mess. Nami bit her lip, but stayed where she was. All right, everyone. I'm going in. As soon as I attack, you guys move in and take out the rest of the fishmen, except Hachi. Arlong is mine. With that, Nami produced her cleam attack and twirled it, vanishing from sight a moment later. Their haki allowed them to keep track of her, but they focused more on the crew of their would-be enemies. These guys are even weaker than Hodi's crew. I honestly don't think it's worth it to fight them, Zoro said. They're embarrassingly weak, sure, but after what they did to Nami, I'm looking forward to beating them again, Sanji said, already sizzling slightly. Even so, it looks like the group is as small as they are weak. Any one of us could take them down single-handedly, in a manner of speaking, Robin said. Did you just make a joke? Usopp asked, the rest of the crew looking at her with similar incredulity. You all have rubbed off on me over the years, Robin replied, shrugging. Anyway, Robin, you bind Hachi to make sure he doesn't interfere. Luffy, the cook, and I will take out the rest of the crew, Zoro said. Everyone agreed, and with that, they turned their attention back to the house, where Nami's father figure, Genzo, was presenting her tribute money to Arlong, who began to walk away with his crew before Bell-Mir spoke. Thank goodness. With those 100,000 berries, I'll be able to save my 2 children. That money is for my daughters. I don't have enough to pay for myself, Bell-Mir said. Bell-Mir? Genzo shouted as the fishmen turned around. I'm sorry, Genzo. I just can't bring myself to say that I don't have a family, even if it means losing my life, even if it's just words, I still want to be called their mother. They're my daughters, aren't they? She asked, tears in her eyes. Bell-Mir. 2 young voices said. The woman looked to see the 2 children she had adopted running towards her, and kneeled down to embrace them for what she knew would be the last time. I was lying. Nami bawled. Bell-Mir smiled lightly. I really wanted to buy you girls some more things, books or clothes. Forgive me for not being a better mother to you too, she said. No, we don't want anything. Please stay with us, don't die, Bell-Mir, they cried. Aren't you a former Marine, Bell-Mir? You're strong. You should be able to beat these guys up easily, Najiko begged. I still haven't shown you my map of the world, Nami cried. Are these kids your daughters? Growled the monstrous fishman in front of her. She looked up, facing her death with a strong face. Yes. Don't lay a finger on them, she said. Of course, as long as you die quietly, Arlong said, smiling humorlessly as he raised a pistol. Someone help! Nami screamed. Genzo seemed to throw caution to the wind as he pulled out a pair of pistols and began firing at Arlong. She saw out of the corner of her eye that a stingray fishman blocked the bullets with only his arm and slashed him across the chest. Cries from nearby informed her that the entire village was coming in an attempt to help her. They can't win, Bell-Mir thought, knowing it to be true, even as Arlong ordered his men to attack. You'll be the first example. Die for your worthless love, Arlong snarled, smirking. Bell-Mir opened her mouth to speak her last words of love to her daughters, but a scream of pain from the fishman in front of her stalled that, and all of the fishmen who had been heading towards the villagers stopped and looked at Arlong in confusion. What greeted their eyes was a hand that seemed to have been frozen solid, along with the pistol. Before anyone could recover, a massive wind erupted from directly beside Arlong, sending him crashing into several trees on the other side of Terd with more confusion than anything else. Even the other fishmen, up until a figure dressed in black materialized, twirling a strange-looking staff and looking towards the fishman that had been sent flying. "Don't lay another finger on Belmere," she screamed, as the voice was clearly female. Belmere stared at her in confusion, but found herself distracted another moment later as the rest of the Arlong pirates charged at her. The woman did not even turn around as 8 more figures in black cloaks appeared between the first figure and pirates. In less than the time that it took her to blink twice, the entire group of monsters had been attacked, and fell into a beaten, bloody, burned mess. Only one remained standing, an octopus man who was currently bound in place by 20 disembodied arms. Belmere's jaw hit the ground, as did those of her daughters and the entire village watching nearby. Silence fell for only a few moments before an enraged roar came from nearby. "You worthless humans! How dare you do this to us, the superior fishmen?" Arlong yelled, surging towards the figure with the staff. She nonchalantly raised it, and then swung it down. The result was a blade of wind that knocked Arlong back again. "Sanji, get Genzo and Dr. Nako over here. Chopper, treat them," she said before twirling her staff again and vanishing. The next moment, Belmere found herself forced onto the ground beside her daughters by a small but strong figure that began looking over her arm and face, Genzo and the doctor right next to him. "Don't worry, I'm a doctor. I'll take care of this." "Dr. Nako, you help Genzo with that cut," he said, in a voice that sounded remarkably like a child. The mannerisms he used, however, made it clear that he knew what he was doing. Nako barely hesitated before shaking off the shock of the situation and partaking of the small doctor's supplies to start treating Genzo. Belmere gritted her teeth a bit as the small doctor dabbed at her arm, her daughters still clinging to her, but she was amazed at the pace at which the hurt began to ebb away. "Who are you people?" she asked. "We'll explain after Arlong's dealt with," the figure replied, now bandaging her up. Belmere looked up from the treatment she was receiving to see that all of the other villagers were trying, with a distinct lack of success, to pick up their jaws. She saw exactly why at the next moment, when her eyes fell upon the impossible sight of a rapidly coalescing group of winds buffeting Arlong from all sides. The weather forecast is calm, not a cloud in the sky. However, the winds of time are carrying tomorrow's anger that will clash with yesterday's pain, resulting in a sudden tornado. At that point, the wind began to rise into the air, imprisoning Arlong in the whirlwind. Also, be on the lookout for a sudden thunderstorm. In particular, watch out for lightning strikes, because they're aiming for you, Arlong, weather eggs. 2 orbs appeared out of thin air at the next moment, and Belmere could see what looked like black clouds inside. "Whoa, she's using 2 of those things?" asked one of the figures with what sounded like panic. "Calm down, I'm sure she's got it under control," said another. "Hatch, dear lightning." The 2 eggs opened, and thunderclouds poured out, growing and coalescing into a massive cloud in a matter of seconds. The tornado rose into the clouds, which took on a spherical form as it crackled with electricity. The figure materialized a moment later. "Robin, cover everyone's ears and eyes," she said, and then raised her staff. "Thunder breed tempo. Rygo," she screamed. Belmere felt gentle hands cover her eyes and ears, and she held her daughters close as blinding lightning and deafening thunder assaulted her senses. Her daughters were trembling, but her hands around their heads revealed that hands were covering their eyes and ears as well. Remembering the octopus bindings, she relaxed. In fact, she realized that probably saved their senses. It was a few moments before she felt the doctor begin dabbing at her arm again, and another few before the arms covering her eyes and ears vanished. She looked at her daughters to see their eyes still covered, and looked at the figures, intending to demand that their arms be removed from her children. Then she saw the figure of Arlong, and such thoughts died out of her mind. "Be Belmere? Is it over?" Nami asked. "We're safe, Nami. But both of you keep your eyes shut for now. I'll let you know when you can open them," Belmere said quietly. She had no intention of letting her daughters lay eyes on the blackened, bloody mass of deformed cartilage that had been holding her at gunpoint a few moments before. They were already going to have enough nightmares. She held them close with her good arm while she felt her other being bandaged up, and stared after the figures in cloaks. A bulkier one of them gathered Arlong's body and deposited it before the octopus. Arlong, the octopus said, tearing up. But as the figure who had laid the body before him removed his hood, his sadness faded before pure shock. JJ Jinbei? I looked away for 10 minutes, and Arlong decides to enslave a group of innocent humans who had never even heard of Big Bro T or Otahime. It's unbelievable how much the hatred for humans has poisoned our race. BB but Jinbei, how? I'm not the Jinbei you know, Hachi. I come from 11 years in the future, where I've seen the hostility between humans and fishmen die, and where I met an old man who gave my crew the power to return to the past and save something we lost. I've never forgiven myself for the pain Arlong caused for 8 years on this island before he was finally stopped. And I've just saved you from years of trouble that you would have been ashamed to ever speak to Rayleigh or Shaki about. The octopus looked to be in shock. The rest of the crew will be imprisoned for what they intended. You're the only one I can trust not to act out against this. Go to the nearest marine base after base 16 and turn in Arlong, and see to it that his crew is arrested. Then return to Fishman Island, and inform my past self of everything that happened here as soon as you get there. Also, impress upon him 2 things. Make sure Hody Jones doesn't have any chance to act on his hatred. And make sure that nobody loyal to Arlong gets the chance to enslave any islands, especially this one. When that's done, I suggest you forego piracy and look into opening that takoyaki stand you dreamed about. Hachi stared at Jinbei for a few seconds in silence. Can I take Karubi and Chu with me? They wanted to open the stand, too, he asked at last. Jinbei sighed. Inform my past self first, then see about getting them released. But make sure that they can get past their hatred. If they don't, one of the earliest consequences will be the death of the queen. Hachi's eyes opened wide in horror, and then his expression hardened. He sighed, and bowed his head. All right, Jinbei. I'll do it. Jinbei nodded, and the bonds holding the octopus were released. One more thing, he said, before leaning in and whispering something. Hachi nodded again, and then ran away, carrying Arlong with him. With the monstrous threat dealt with, Bell-Mir watched as the man that had spoken, Jinbei apparently, replaced his hood before turning back towards her, along with the other 8 figures. The last one, the one who had bent the weather to her will to attack Arlong, stood directly before her again, looking down at her and her daughters, whose eyes were now uncovered. Are you all right, Bell-Mir? She asked, extending a hand to help her up. Bell-Mir took it without hesitation, rising to her feet and showing no weakness. I'm fine, thanks, girls, you can open your eyes now. Nami and Nijiko both opened their eyes and looked at the figure in awe. That was awesome. How did you do that? Nami said. The woman chuckled and showed her staff, which was now the size of a baton. The Kleem attacked, a one-of-a-kind weapon that lets me control the Ned. That is impressive, and I don't want to seem ungrateful for saving my life. But who the hell are you people? Bell-Mir asked with a frown. Pirates, the woman replied simply. Bell-Mir stiffened slightly, and the woman spoke further. We came here from the future thanks to a strange old man. He gave us the chance to return to a past time and save something that we had lost before. In our time, Arlong came here and killed you, and enslaved Nami for her map-making skills. Bell-Mir's eyes widened, and she subconsciously held Nami closer to her. He made her draw sea charts day in and day out, but made her a deal for her cooperation. If she could pay him 100 million berries, he'd set her and Kokoyashi free. So, she became a thief, but one that stole only from pirates. It was hard work, and she had to endure the cold stares of the village throughout 8 years, pretending that she had joined Arlong's crew just for the money she got. The last crew she stole from was a kind-hearted group of pirates that gave her a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt since you died. She cried when she had to leave them, and even tried to push them away when they followed her home to try to get her back. She had gathered 93 million berries by that time. But Arlong used a loophole in the deal by hiring a group of corrupt marines to steal her money. The village, which had secretly known the situation the whole time, was furious, and rushed off to Arlong's base in a suicide charge, just like they were trying to now. She paused, and Nijiko hesitantly spoke up, but they didn't all die, did they? Bell-Mir dreaded the answer. No, they didn't. Out of desperation, Nami begged the pirates for help. They gave it without hesitation, and single-handedly decimated Arlong's crew, freeing the village. Nami joined the crew permanently, and sailed with that crew all the way to the end of the Grand Line, finally completing her map of the entire world as a result. Belle stared at the woman. "And what does that have to do with you? That Jinbei person over there seemed to know the fishmen. Was this a mistake of his?" In a way, Jinbei spoke up. "I was part of a fishman pirate crew known as the Sun Pirates, formed as a way of salvation for the fishmen suffering in slavery. Arlong was also a member of that crew. He had grown up hating humans because of their prejudice towards our race, and any chance of that changing died when they caused the death of our old captain. In this time, the Sun Pirates have recently disbanded due to me becoming one of the 7 warlords of the sea, to ensure that my fellow crewmates can return home and live their lives without persecution. The one bit of anxiety I had was Arlong, who'd been arrested for trying to avenge the captain's death, but he was released as part of the bargain. He gathered his crew and left the island almost as soon as he was freed. I warned him not to try anything, and I'd be there if I heard any news. But he journeyed here, far away from Fishman Island, and bribed the nearest marine base to make sure news didn't leak out to anyone. I still don't find myself worthy of the forgiveness your daughter gave me when I apologized for it in my time," he finished quietly. Belle blinked slowly, any hostility she had gained when hearing the story vanishing. When all was said and done, he regretted more than what he was responsible for. "I see. So, you came back to this time to correct that mistake?" she asked. "No, it wasn't Jinbei's choice to come here. It was mine. I came here to keep Nami from watching her mother die right in front of her, and regret complaining about her not having money for the rest of her life." The woman finally raised her hands and removed her hood. The young woman revealed underneath had long, flowing orange hair and teary eyes. Belle understood the truth for only a moment before the woman wrapped her arms around her, hugging her tightly. "Belle, I've missed you so much," she whispered, tears now flowing freely down her face. Belle slowly raised her hands and held the young woman that she now knew was her daughter, dismissing that she was a pirate and embracing her as tightly as she could. It was several minutes before they finally separated, and Belle looked with interest and scrutiny at the crew behind her, who had also removed their hoods. 5 of them seemed to be normal humans. One, the doctor that had treated her, was a small bipedal deer, barely discernible from a raccoon dog by the antlers beneath his hat. One was a massive man with a metal nose and oddly shaped chin and body. The one she knew to be Jinbei was a bulky blue-skinned fishman. And then, there was a skeleton. Literally a skeleton, somehow with a black afro. It took a few seconds before she could get past the oddness of what she saw to speak. "So, my daughter became a pirate. I hope that the crew you joined isn't a band of bloodthirsty maniacs," she said quietly. Nami chuckled. "Belle, if they didn't call themselves pirates, you'd never believe that they were from the way that they act." "Well, except maybe Zoro," Nami replied, smirking. "Oh, shut up, witch," said one of the men, an intimidating figure with green hair and a scar across one eye. That didn't seem to bother Belle, however. Faster than blinking, she had appeared next to him, and a goose egg was on his scalp. "Don't you dare insult my daughter," she snapped. The remainder of the crew burst out laughing. "Wow. You're definitely Nami's mother," said one of them, a long-nosed man that she recognized as the one who had panicked when Nami unleashed those strange eggs from his voice. "Yep. She'd have to be, to do all of that without Haki," Zoro said, slowly rising to his feet again. Belle couldn't help but smile. "So, you're me?" Belle and the crew looked back towards Nami, who was kneeling in front of her younger self and her sister. "Yep. I'm you at age 21, the best navigator and mapmaker in the world. But you're a pirate, part of the nicest pirate crew you'll ever meet," she said reassuringly, and gestured to the rest of the crew. "They're annoying sometimes, but they've become as much of a family for me as Nijiko and Genzo. Come on, I'll introduce you." Within 10 minutes, all traces of tension were gone. The crew of fishmen had been moved to the coast and bound up by strong ropes before anyone was the wiser, and the aftermath of the invasion had turned into a full-blown party thanks to the Straw Hat Pirates. Young Nami and Nijiko were in the center of most of the festivities, spending all of the time that they could with their future family. It had been remarkably easy for them to get past the disturbing appearance of the musician, Brooke, when he began joking and playing party music, and the antics of Frankie the robot shipwright alongside him had the girls and many of the villagers doubled over with laughter. Nico Robin the archaeologist and Usopp the sniper entertained everyone with stories of their adventures, talking of giants and sky islands and sea monsters and saving kingdoms. Even with the outrageous display of strength that they showed earlier, if it hadn't been for Robin's down-to-earth way of phrasing the details, they may not have believed them. As it was, Nami was practically glowing with excitement, and Nijiko was strongly considering going with them when the time came. Sanji the chef took impossibly little time to prepare a gourmet feast fit for the entire village. Nobody could tell where he had gotten the ingredients from, though he mentioned to Nami that he always kept a few spice jars on hand, but they stopped caring as soon as they tasted his food. Nami was hooked from the first bite of roast duck and stew, but the tangerine sauce provided by Belmere's own orchard made her almost faint in bliss. Belmere herself barely had a drop on her tongue before she demanded the recipe, which was given to her along with a few other delectable tangerine recipes exactly 1 second later. I had some spare time at the last places we visited, Enki, to have the recipes I've developed for your daughter over the years, he had explained. Belmere had given him a bit of a stern look, clearly conveying that he was to watch it with her, but had thanked him sincerely nonetheless. Jinbei took a while to join in the festivities, but when young Nami approached him and timidly asked him, he conceded. Any feelings of fear because of the fishmen that had invaded her island faded as she spoke more with him, and she was soon captivated with the story of Fishman Island. Roronoa Zoro, who they learned had taken Dracul Mahawk's title of greatest swordsman in the world, turned out to be a relatively laid-back person. It was clear to everyone that if battle was involved, he could quickly become a monster, but perhaps due to the ease with which Belmere could make him heal, Nami found no fear looking at him. He had little to say to her, but she got the feel of a protective big brother off of him. A protective big brother that really liked to drink. The doctor, Tony Chopper, had made short work of Belmere's and Genzo's injuries before joining in the party himself, contributing with a pair of chopsticks in his nose, stretching his lips out. It came as a surprise to many that the captain of them all, the pirate king Monkey D. Luffy, the one who had defeated Arlong and freed Nami in the original time, was no less happy-go-lucky than the rest of the crew. If anything, he was the most childlike among them, and the powers he displayed from the gum fruit only served to make him more entertaining. It was the best time that young Nami could ever remember having, and throughout it all, Belmere watched from a short distance. Older Nami sat beside her, and even as they spoke about their respective pasts, Belmere interested in what her daughter would go through, and Nami eager to hear what her mother's time as a marine had been like. Both were content to watch her younger self's interaction for several minutes. Finally, Belmere broke their silence. I see what you mean. If this is what the Pirate King and his crew are like, I may have chosen the wrong career path, she said with a smirk. Her tone was only half joking. Nami gave a sigh. You'd really be amazed, Belmere, just how much evil there really is in the world government. Sure, we came across a lot of pirates on our journey, and there were only a few that I could actually consider good, but learning just how the world government came to power, and what lengths they go to just to make sure nobody ever finds out the truth, it makes me sick. The mother looked to her daughter. Really? Would you like to elaborate on that? Nami shook her head, her smile becoming a little sad. Not really, Belmere. The old man who let us come back here to save you warned us that we'd only be able to stay in each time period for 1 hour. And saving you here isn't going to change anything in my time. I don't want to waste the chance I have to see you again, talk to you again after all these years, talking about ancient history that you'll find out anyway in a decade or so. Belmere nodded, feeling similarly sad herself at what this version of her daughter had gone through. She sighed. I am sorry that I couldn't give you more growing up. I'm probably not going to be able to give your younger self much this time either. Nami turned to look at her with a blank expression, and blinked several times. You know, back before this day in my time, I always wanted to do this, she said. Then Belmere found herself doubled over, rubbing the back of her head where a comically large bump was. That settles it. When it comes to Nami's safety as part of what must be the most infamous crew in the world, I have nothing to worry about, Belmere thought to herself. Don't talk crap like that, you'll be there for her, and that's all she needs, money doesn't matter anywhere as much as family does. Many of the partygoers had stopped to look at Nami, including her younger self and her sister. Older Nami took a few breaths as Belmir stared at her with an unreadable expression. Besides, Nami continued, significantly less angry, once she joins the Straw Hat Pirates, she'll be able to bring home more money than you know what to do with. I still remember the first time I saw One Piece. Belmir and many others' sweat dropped as they saw Nami's eyes turn into sparkling berry symbols. Is this normal? She asked the other pirates. Yes, they said in unison, completely deadpan. Somehow, that's even worse than if it wasn't, she sighed, while younger Nami looked almost awestruck. Jinbei, came a voice. Everyone present turned to see Hachi, the octopus fishman that had been spared from the brutal defeat of the rest of the crew, hauling 6 massive sacks towards them, one in each arm. He set them down after a moment, and Jinbei nodded. Good work, Hachi. Nami, is there a reason that your crew didn't attack him? Belmir asked. When Arlong's crew was arrested, Hachi was the only one who got away. He abandoned piracy to live out his old dream of opening a takoyaki stand. We met him again at the end of the first half of the Grand Line as a friend of a mermaid and starfish that we rescued from a sea cane. It took me a while to forgive him, but he proved that he was worth being called a friend, Nami replied, and then called after Jinbei. What's in the sacks? Oh, I just thought that your family could find some use for the treasure that was on Arlong's ship, Jinbei replied, smirking knowingly. Quick as a flash, young Nami was opening one of the sacks, and her jaw dropped as she saw the berry notes within. Thank you so much, Jinbei, she said ecstatically and ran over to Belmir. Look, Belmir. We're rich. Belmir smiled. But that smile dropped rather quickly when she saw that her young daughter's eyes had turned to berry symbols. She looked accusingly at her older version, which just laughed. You look good, kid, she said, and was promptly punched by her mother. Don't encourage her to do that. I'm even fine with her joining this pirate crew after what I've seen, but that is just unhealthy. Older Nami didn't seem to hear her as she rubbed her head. She looked up, and Belmir's exasperation melted away as she saw her face. Wow. I didn't realize that I even missed you hitting me that much, she said softly. The mother and daughter embraced each other once more, and young Nami found herself thinking about just what she would have gone through if Belmir hadn't been saved. Considering it for even a second brought tears to her eyes, and as she wiped them away, she made up her mind. Belmir, I'm sorry that I said I wished I had been adopted by someone rich. You're the best mother ever, she said. The two older women separated as she spoke, and Belmir hugged both of her younger daughters. And you two are the best daughters that I could ever ask for, she replied. The future crew gathered together as Belmir released Nami and Nijiko and stood up. Belmir's eyes locked onto the captain. Monkey D. Luffy. I have to thank you for the happiness that you've given my daughter, and keeping her safe throughout your journey. Of course, she's my friend, Luffy said with a grin. Belmir smiled briefly back. But I'm warning you now. If you ever do anything to take away her smile, I will find out, and I will find a way to come to the future and kill you for it, she said, her tone as serious as cancer. Luffy laughed. Genzo made the same promise when we left last time, and I'm still alive, he said jovially, then he looked at her more seriously. But I promise you, I'd sooner die than hurt any of my friends. The few reservations that Belmir had left faded, and a moment later, light shone out from the 10 pirates, making all present shield their eyes. I guess our time's up. I'm sorry, Belmir. I wish I could have stayed longer, older Nami said. What are you apologizing for, Nami? You saved my life, and gave my daughters a much brighter future. Your dreams just like you said you would. I couldn't be prouder of you, Belmir replied, tearing up a bit. It was too much for Nami, who rushed to hug her yet again. I'm so glad I got to see you again, one last time, she whispered. Belmir raised her arms to hold her daughter close for what little time she could. I love you, Nami, Belmir whispered. Nami slowly released her as she stepped back towards her crew, and they locked eyes one more time, for a second that contained an eternity. I love you too, Belmir, Nami said, smiling at her mother. Then the light vanished, taking the pirates with it. The familiar scent of the ocean breeze returned to the pirates' nostrils as the time jump finished, but equally prominent were the scents of wood and metal. Most of the crew had only just begun to recognize where they were from the countless pieces of ruined ships around them when Frankie spoke. "This is Scrap Island. This is the day that Spanda stole my battleships to frame Tom." He looked around frantically and, spying the ships that he had used, moved over to them as fast as shaving. The others followed at equal speed, by which time Frankie had already disassembled 2 of them and was working on a 3rd. "Even after everything else I've seen, I still say that doesn't make sense," Usopp thought to himself. "Frankie, wait," Robin said firmly. The shipwright had already finished with the 3rd ship, but slowly turned back to look at Robin before he could do more. "What is it, Robin?" he growled. "If you disassemble the ships, Spandam and his agents won't have the chance to attempt to frame Tom." Frankie blinked with a blank expression, along with everyone else. "Isn't that the point?" Luffy asked. Robin gave a chilling smile before speaking again. "Personally, I prefer the idea of letting his agents steal the battleships. We catch them in the act and bring them on board the judicial ship that they attempted to attack, and interrogate Spandam before judge and jury. Perhaps they'd even let us act as executioners." It was at that moment that they remembered exactly how much Spandam had tormented Robin when she had been in his custody. He had beaten her, taunted her, made her cry. A wave of haki washed over them before Luffy spoke a single word. "Frankie?" The cyborg had already made up his mind. "I'll be the one to interrogate him. Guys, let's get going. We have company," Sanji said, replacing his hood. A group of uniformed agents approached the ships, looking around them with an air of grim determination. But though they thought they had heard voices around the area of the ships, there was nobody to be seen when they arrived and began to board them. Many of the inhabitants of the city of Water 7 were flocking to the judicial ship that was docking at the island. Tom, the master fishman shipwright, had fulfilled the promise he made and constructed the sea train. There were none who would object to him being acquitted of the crime of building the Oro Jackson. A young blue-haired man named Cuddy Flam, nicknamed Frankie to those who knew him, paused in his shopping to observe the ship as it came in, and the civilians began flocking to it. "Wow. It's been 14 years already," he thought, looking over the ship. Memories stirred of the last time that ship had come, and though he still felt resentment for how his teacher had been attacked before, he couldn't help but feel happy with what had been done since then to acquit him. It shouldn't have been necessary, but at least it would be over soon. The peace was shattered instantly as an explosion erupted next to the judicial ship, rocking the boat where it was docked. More explosions followed quickly, all of them around the ship. While many of the spectators began to flee, thinking it a pirate attack, Frankie spotted some figures in black around the ship. They seemed to appear wherever the explosions were. Gritting his teeth, he dropped the shopping basket before running towards one of them, fist outstretched. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled, punching with all of his strength at the nearest one. The figure caught his fist in its palm, and fear washed over Frankie as he felt the strength behind it. It was more powerful than one of his battleships. Then that fear faded before pure shock as the figure stretched an arm an impossible distance above his head, and caught a cannonball that was aiming at the ship. The figure released Frankie's hand and pointed in the distance, and Frankie's eyes widened in horror as he recognized several of his own battleships, his own Battle Frankie ships, firing towards the judicial ship. What the, he managed. "We'll explain everything later, Frankie. For now, just know that we're here to help," the man said, his voice suggesting relative youth. Frankie didn't respond, only watching spellbound as the group of figures, 8 that he could count, continued fending off shot after shot from his Battle Frankie ships. After a minute or so of this, Frankie noticed the old judge that had pardoned Tom before, Jorge, coming onto the judicial ship's deck along with his guards. "Guys, now, disarm those battleships," roared a massive figure, appearing on the deck next to the judge. Frankie was hardly thinking at the moment, only focusing on getting some answers as to what exactly the hell was going on. As he ran up the steps to the ship, he saw out of the corner of his eye that several of the figures in black were moving towards the battleships. One was swimming, 2 were flying, and 1 was running on the water. He slowed down the slightest amount as he took that in, confirming that he was indeed seeing the impossible sight that he thought he was seeing, and then continued to run up the steps. The massive black figure was facing the judge, who was surrounded by many Marines that had their rifles in their hands, but not raised to fire. His arrival drew everyone's attention. Okay. Your Honor, do you have any idea what the hell is going on here? We appear to be under attack, and are being protected thanks to the intervention of these strangers, the judge replied. His voice made it clear that he was not coping perfectly with the current events either. Besides the obvious, Frankie growled. This gentleman has neglected to elaborate beyond the obvious, though he says he'll do so as soon as the perpetrators are exposed, Jorge said, gesturing to the massive man beside him. Frankie turned to him, and was promptly cut off when three of the figures from before returned over to where they were, jumping and landing on the deck with a group of men in their grasps, all dressed in suited uniforms. Government agents, huh? Who sent you to attack the judicial ship, and why? The massive man growled. The agents remained perfectly silent. Answer his question, the judge said, peering at them sternly. You have no authority over us, Jorge, spat one of the agents. One of the other cloaked figures moved to stand beside the massive man. Maybe you didn't hear the question, he said, and Frankie recognized him as the man that he had tried to attack before. The next moment, Frankie felt a strange and terrible force pressing down hard on him, something about that man making him sweat bullets. WHO sent you to attack this ship. He yelled. The agents, who looked to be on the verge of passing out, spoke in unison. Spandam, chief of Cypher Police No. 5. The aura died as fast as it had come, and the agents collapsed, out cold. Frankie sunk to his knees himself, staring at the man. Whoever he was glad he wasn't an enemy. The massive man spoke again. Your Honor, I'm sure you heard what they said. Now, I'd like for someone to keep a record of the interrogation that's about to happen, just to be sure that nobody objects when this bastard gets what's coming to him. A stream of indignant yells and screams coming from above them cut off any chance of responding. Looking up, they saw one of the cloaked figures with a man in his arms, slowly descending towards them. As they touched down, the man squirmed out of the figure's arms, crashing to the deck before rising to his feet. Frankie's eyes narrowed as he recognized the panda-like man that had come to see Tom a few days before, about the Pluton blueprints. What the hell is all of this? I demand. His speech was abruptly cut off by the spontaneous appearance of many arms all across his body, pinning his arms to his sides, binding his feet in place, and covering his mouth. At the same time, two of the figures drew swords and crossed them beneath Spandam's chin, one white and one black, ready to decapitate him. Spandam had been smugly awaiting the news of the success of his plasland. That had lasted all of 1 minute before the agents reported back that a mysterious group of figures were fending off the attack, and not one shot had made it to the judicial ship yet. Furious, Spandam had looked through his binoculars to see a group of figures in black slicing, striking, or deflecting the blows with apparent ease. His eyes widened as he saw a pair of them approaching the battleships themselves with the moonwalk technique. Impossible. The only ones who should be capable of using any of the 6 powers are Dad's subordinates. I have authority for this mission directly from the 5 Elder Stars. Not even CP9 has the right to interfere with this, Spandam said furiously. His eyes widened further still as he saw the Marines and agents being abducted from the battleships by one of the flying figures and 2 that had approached on the water. The battleships were left dead in the water, and Spandam grimaced. Well, at least they're not going to say anything. Still, this is absurd. After I get out of this mess, I'll have to come up with another way to frame Tom and get those blueprints. But one way or another, I'll get my hands on Pluton, and I'll bring this great pirate era to its end. And most importantly of all, I'll get my promotion. I might even join the 5 Elder Stars themselves, or I could just use Pluton to overthrow them. It's not like anyone could stand up to that monster. Oh, yes. Being king of the entire world. I love that idea. Spandam grinned as images of his own splendor ran rampant through his mind, and he set the binoculars down, reaching into his coat to grab a transponder snail, intending to call his father to ask about rogue CP9 agents. After all, those 2 that had been flying towards the battleships were definitely using moonwalk. Those 2, too? Wait a minute. Only one of those 2 was grabbing the agents. But then, where's the other one? Spandam wondered aloud, picking up the binoculars again. Right behind you, came a voice an inch from his ear. Spandam screamed, growing louder even as he was forcibly grabbed before the figure began jumping. Put me down. Put me down this instant. You might want to rethink that, the figure said dryly. Spandam then noticed that he was now several meters above the sea, and he swallowed before resuming his rant. Do you have any idea whoiam? You bastard? You're interfering in matters of the utmost importance to the world government. Do you honestly believe that you're not going to be punished for this under the law? I'll have you hanged. And so the litany of threats continued up until the figure brought him on the deck of the judicial ship. He barely acknowledged the presence of the judge and Marines, or that the other agents seemed to be unconscious. What the hell is all of this? I demand. His ranting ended at last when he felt himself become bound. Gentle but firm arms gripped him tightly all over his body while two blades crossed by his throat, and his eyes widened in horror before he began attempting to squirm out of his bonds. A massive figure dressed in black with enormous and oddly shaped arms walked over to him, towering above him and drawing his sight. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Jorge presides, and the cloaked strangers serve as chief witnesses for the prosecution, he stated firmly. Jorge raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Then the giant turned back to Spandam, and spoke in a voice filled with hate. You're in no place to demand anything. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask you some simple yes or no questions. And every time you lie or don't answer, we're going to cut something off. And I guarantee you, they will be things you will miss, he snarled. As if to emphasize his point, the blades moved briefly to touch Spandam's left shoulder and armpit, poised to amputate the arm. The man sweated more, and nodded frantically, clearly ready to comply. The hand covering his mouth moved down slightly to caress his throat, clearly ready to grip it if provoked, and the swordsmen returned their blades to be directly before that hand before the figure began his interrogation. Are you Spandam? Yes, he replied immediately. The chief of CP5? Yes. The son of Spandine? Yes, Spandam replied, thinking again that his might had to do with CP9. Do you have authorization to be on this island? Yes. Do you like elephants? Spandam, along with everyone else he could see, looked puzzled at the non sequitur. Yes. He replied truthfully. His fears began to ebb away at that point. Maybe this wasn't something to worry about after all. Did you come to this island because of an appeal you made to the 5 Elder Stars? Spandam stiffened, his sudden hope fading fast. Why yes. Do you desire to bring the great pirate era to an end as fast as possible? Yes. Did your appeal have to do with that? Yes. Did it involve one of the ancient weapons? The hands gripped him tighter, and he swallowed, feeling his neck struggle to bulge against the hand at his neck. Why yes. Was it Pluton? Why yes. The figure looming over him seemed to grow even larger as he spoke even more coldly. Did you send orders to these agents to commandeer those battleships, known to be the creations of Tom's apprentice, Cutty Flam, who is currently standing right here and therefore could not have used those ships, to destroy this judicial ship with the intention to frame Tom so that you could interrogate him for the location of the blueprints for Pluton that he supposedly has in his possession, but denied as much when you spoke to him a few days ago? An unearthly chill invaded Spandam's senses, and he noted in horror that it was emanating from the white sword at his throat. He could feel his skin beginning to freeze. His instinct was to panic, but the logical portion of his mind forced itself forward. They know what the answer to the question is, and if I lie, I'll be dead or worse. There's no choice, I'll have to confess it. Dad can get me out of this mess. The fact that there are rogue CP9 agents involved should get rid of any credibility about this. It won't be any worse than a setback. Yes, he said at last. The swords were removed and the hands vanished, leaving Spandam to fall face first before the judge, who was glaring down at him alongside Cutty Flam, the Marines, and several civilians that had approached as the interrogation went on. Your Honor, allow me to add an additional piece of evidence before you offer your sentence, said the figure that had brought him over, pulling a strange seashell out of his cloak. He pressed a button on it, and the resulting noise made Spandam's blood run cold. This is absurd. After I get out of this mess, I'll have to come up with another way to frame Tom and get those blueprints. But one way or another, I'll get my hands on Pluton, and I'll bring this great pirate era to its end. And most importantly of all, I'll get my promotion. I might even join the 5 Elder Stars themselves, or I could just use Pluton to overthrow them. It's not like anyone could stand up to that monster. Oh, yes. Being king of the entire world. I love that idea. Spandam was soaked in his own sweat, looking with horror at the shell. Spandam of CP5. Spandam turned slowly to face the judge, whose glare was positively arctic. You are charged with the crimes of theft, abuse of government authority and resources, attempted frame-up, attempted destruction of government property, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit high treason. The judge raised his voice as he spoke to the watchers. Has our jury reached a verdict? Guilty, guilty, they screamed, far from in unison but with the same words. The jury rules in favor of the prosecution. Spandam of CP5, you are hereby stripped of your title and sentenced to execution, Jorge said gravely. Spandam did not have so much as a second to respond to this before one of the interrogator's massive hands grabbed his head, lifting him off of the ground. Your Honor, I request permission to see immediately, he heard the man say. Permission granted, came the reply. Excruciating pain came across his senses for a single second, and then Spandam knew no more. Before the interrogation began, Frankie was under the distinct impression that nothing could make him angrier than he was at that moment. That was proven wrong no less than 3 times throughout the interrogation, and at the moment he heard the judge say, execution, he was ready to request that he be granted permission to blow him to oblivion with his battleships. The disappointment that he felt when he was robbed of that chance was non-existent, however, when a symphony of bones cracking filled the air as the massive figure squeezed, crushed, and rolled Spandam between his massive gloved hands with the casual motions of crumpling up a piece of paper. The Marines and everyone watching were clearly horrified, and were visibly relieved when he dumped whatever was left over the side of the ship, rather than where anyone could see it. Cutty Flam. Inform Tom that his trial will be postponed for another 24 hours while I recover from these events. Court adjourned, Jorge muttered, staggering back inside the ship. Frankie gulped as the figures turned to him, now counting 10 altogether. You're going to see Tom, huh? We have business with him as well, said the figure that had held the shell. The civilians looked up at hearing this, but none were willing to speak. Not that they had a chance to. In the space of 2 seconds, Frankie had been picked up, and the figures had vanished from sight. Any sense of direction or location that Frankie had vanished as soon as the figure picked him up. The only thing his senses could discern was that the wind and his surroundings were rushing by as if he were riding Rocketman at full speed. He could not be certain for the life of him, but he'd say that it took about 2 minutes before everything slowed down, and he was set down onto his own 2 feet. He hazily recognized a couple of familiar figures in front of him. Frankie, what the hell is going on? Iceberg demanded. Hey there, brains for ice, did you get the stuff that Kokororo asked for Tom's equity partle? He slurred, stumbling forward a couple of steps before falling flat on his face. Wow. I haven't seen anyone that punch drunk since Usopp tried to outshave Luffy, said one of the figures. Another one ran forward, pulling something from inside his cloak before waving it in front of Frankie's face. The horrible smells emanating cleared his head as fast as blinking, and he got to his feet. He then recognized that Iceberg, Tom, Kokora, and Yokozuna were all looking at him with questioning expressions, and that he was at the Tom's Workers building. Blinking, he turned back around to see the 10 strange figures, and opened his mouth. Let's go inside. Then we'll talk, said the massive man. Frankie exhaled sharply, but wasted no more time before walking back towards the building, grabbing Iceberg as he went. Tom, thanks to these guys, your trial isn't for another day. We need to listen to what they have to say, he barked. Taken aback by the tone Frankie used, Iceberg stopped resisting being dragged, and the others followed him inside the small building. Remarkably, all 15 of them were able to fit comfortably. All right, who the hell are you people? Frankie demanded. In unison, the 10 of them raised their hands and removed their hoods, revealing 10 very different individuals. A young man with black hair and a scar under one eye. A young man with green hair and a scar over one eye. A young woman with orange hair. A young man with black hair covered by a white hat and orange ear protectors. A young man with blonde hair covering his right eye and a swirly eyebrow over his left. A small bipedal creature that looked very much like a raccoon dog. A woman with black hair and orange sunglasses on her forehead. A tall skeleton with a black afro. And a blue-skinned whale shark fish man that seemed vaguely familiar. The last one, the massive man that had interrogated Spandam, had blue hair and a buzz cut, a metal nose, and a chin that ended in 3 points. "We are the Straw Hat Pirates, the successors of the Roger Pirates," the dark-haired woman said. A collective silence followed these words before Tom began laughing. "What kind of a joke is this? If there were another pirate king, it'd be known all over the world," he chortled. "That would be true, if it had already happened in this time," said the green-haired man. "Our crew was formed 8 years from now, and it was 3 years after that that our captain became the pirate king. On one of the islands that we visit for training, we met and saved an old man with a time-based devil fruit, who allowed us to go back in time to save someone that we lost in our pasts as thanks," said the massive man. Another silence fell after these words, and Frankie broke it a moment later. "Are you saying that if you hadn't come back here, that Spandam bastard would have succeeded in framing Tom? All because of my battleships?" he demanded. "And it took me 8 years to forgive myself for it," the massive man said. As his words sunk in, Frankie's eyes widened, and he gaped at the giant. "Oh, come on. You expect me to believe that Flunky wound up on the Pirate King's crew?" Iceberg asked. "Shut it. Ice for brains." Iceberg's voice and doubts promptly fell silent. Both Frankie and the massive figure had said that in perfect unison. Nobody else ever called him Ice for brains except Frankie. As the truth of the situation sunk in, Tom looked to the future Frankie. "Frankie, what happened to you? Spandam, that government agent that came after the Pluton blueprints a few days ago, stole my battleships to destroy the judicial ship. In my time, he succeeded, and then pinned the crime on us. To keep Iceberg and me from being arrested, you let the absolution of building the sea train erase that day's crime, and accepted a death sentence for building the Oro Jackson. They took you to Eni's lobby on the sea train you built. I couldn't control my rage. I rode out and stood on the tracks, and tried to stop the puffing Tom on my own. You can guess how that went." Kokura, Tom, Iceberg, Yokozuna, and young Frankie all gaped in horror at the man. "I was barely alive when I drifted to a scrap ship. To survive, I rebuilt my body with iron, and became a cyborg. It took 4 years before I made it back to Water 7, which had become a thriving city thanks to the sea train and its beloved new mayor, Iceberg. I met with him later that night, and he passed on the blueprints for Pluton to me, hoping that I'd leave the island so that they'd never be found. But I refused to leave the city. The only advice he gave me that I took was discarding the name Cutty Flam, and only going by Frankie from then on. I became the head of Water 7's underworld, gathering in starving people, thugs, drunkards, and turning them all into bounty hunters and ship dismantlers that became the Frankie family. All of that lasted for 4 years until the day that the Straw Hat Pirates found their way to the city. Long story short, the government's secret assassin group, CP9, had had a few agents undercover in this city for 5 years, and they chose that time to arrest me and try to get the blueprints." Wait a minute. Sorry to interrupt, but if they knew who you were, why'd they wait 4 years? Iceberg asked. "1. Because they thought you still had the blueprints, and you were too good at playing dumb for them to risk making a move any sooner," older Frankie said dryly, though it seemed to be a compliment. "But the main reason was so they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, by getting the only other key to Pluton left in the world. The Straw Hat Pirates archaeologist, Nico Robin," he said, gesturing towards the dark-haired woman. Tom's workers stiffened. "Both of us were taken to Eni's lobby, and in the time it took us to get there, I found out that Robin wasn't the monster that the world government said she was. She may be the only person I revived the ancient weapons, but that doesn't mean she wanted to. None of the Oharan scholars wanted to revive the weapons," Robin said, speaking bitterly. "The truth is that all they were ever interested in was learning the truth of the Void Century, a gap of history that began 900 years ago, and ended with the disappearance of a powerful kingdom and the founding of the world government. The risk that someone could learn the truth about that century, and expose the secrets that the world government has kept hidden since its inception, is the main reason that the study of poneglyphs was outlawed. The ancient weapons were just a convenient cover story. O'Hara's scholars discovered too much about the Void Century through their research, and that's the true reason that the island was destroyed." She turned her gaze on Iceberg. "I confronted you as mayor when I was in CP9's custody, and informed you that I had no interest in the ancient weapons. In response, you stated explicitly that if my desires for learning history would bring the world to ruin, I was better off dying. You were not the first to say something like that. You cannot imagine how many people told me over the course of 20 years that my existence was an unforgivable sin, and that I had no right to want to live. Everyone in the room flinched at hearing that, and Tom was the next to speak. So, you really have no intention of reviving the ancient weapons? Let me put it this way. It was after 20 years of being on the run that I found the poneglyph that told where Pluton was hidden. And the disappointment that it wasn't the Rio poneglyph, the poneglyph that told the true history, was too much for me on top of everything else that I had gone through over the years. If it hadn't been for my captain forcibly carrying me out of the collapsing crypt where the poneglyph was hidden and allowing me a place on his crew, I would have died that day. Tom slowly nodded, and then looked at his older apprentice. Iceberg. As soon as you can, destroy the blueprints. There's no good reason to keep them now. Yes, Tom, he replied, understanding his reasoning. All right, now that that's out of the way, what exactly did you do to prevent history from repeating itself? Tom asked, turning back towards the Straw Hat Pirates. The story finished a few minutes later. Iceberg, Tom, Kokura, and Yokozuna all looked a little green as it did. Count yourselves lucky that you weren't there to see and hear it, young Frankie said, shuddering before looking back at his older self. Seriously, maybe he deserved that, but did you have to be so brutal? Did I forget to mention that Spandam went on to become the head of CP9, and was responsible for bringing both Nico, Robin and me to Eni's lobby? From the second we were brought to him, he never stopped abusing us physically and mentally, me over Tom's death, and Robin over everything she'd gone through, and the fact that he planned to capture the Straw Hats even though CP9 had promised to leave them alone in exchange for her coming quietly. And before all of that, his agents planned to assassinate Iceberg and pin it on the Straw Hats, all just so that he could get his hands on Pluton. Don't forget that he was ready to sacrifice all 10,000 soldiers on Eni's lobby to a buster call just so that he could get away with Robin, said the blonde man. There was a pause as those words sunk in. I was wrong. He didn't deserve that. He deserved worse. You killed that bastard way too quickly, young Frankie spat. For once, Frankie, I agree with you, Iceberg said, his voice as cold as his namesake. So do I, to be honest, but we don't have a whole lot of time. We only get to stay here for an hour, and most of that's already gone. I wasn't going to waste too much of it on revenge, Frankie said, turning to Tom. They were silent for a few moments before Frankie bowed his head. In my time, the last time I ever saw you, you hit me for trying to disown my battleships for what they had been used for. I won't say anything like that this time, but I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry that you had to give up your life because of my stupidity at leaving my battleships laying around. These words pierced young Frankie like the harpoons of his creations, and he slowly turned to look at Iceberg. His fellow apprentice, however, was still staring at his older self, and thoughts anywhere along the lines of, I told you so, were oceans away from his mind. All he could see was the massively changed body hidden beneath the cloak, spherical shoulders and massively oversized arms doubtlessly hiding metal and weapons worked into flesh and bone. This was the fate of the man who, if he was being honest, was his best friend. It was the proof that he had never recovered, and would never recover, from the fact that his mistake killed the only real father that he had ever known. There was no room left for him to add insults. Tom, meanwhile, had half a mind to laugh off what the man was saying. But he didn't, because he saw the same thing that Iceberg did. Frankie, did I ever blame you in your time? Tom asked. No, then what makes you think I have any reason to blame you now? You've done nothing wrong. All you've done is prevent something horrible from happening. The only one who could be blamed for this is dead now. You have nothing to apologize for. Frankie trembled, but it seemed to be too much for him to hear. He moved forward and wrapped his arms around the fish man, who hardly hesitated to respond when he heard and saw the tears of his grown apprentice. Part of me always knew you'd say that. But I've just missed you so much, Tom, Frankie said, tears surging down his face. Many of the other members of the crew noted that he somehow seemed more dignified with his crying than he normally did. So, tell me, how did you ever get out of Eni's lobby? Kokura asked after a minute. Most of the crew recoiled away from her as she spoke, much to the confusion of Tom's workers. Frankie broke his embrace to look over at Kokura, his tone dry as he spoke. You know, so long as I'm here, I may as well ask you. I considered you family for decades, so why the hell, in all that time, did you never tell us that you were a mermaid? Iceberg and young Frankie's jaws hit the deck as they looked at Kokura. She laughed, as did Tom. Well, it never came up. If you had asked how I met Tom, I would have told you, but you never did that, she said amusedly. Mermaid? Iceberg and young Frankie asked. Kokura nonchalantly removed her shoes, revealing fins where feet should have been. When a merman or mermaid turns 30, their tail splits in half and they can live on the land, she explained. A small part of the apprentice's minds reasoned that it must have been something of a rude awakening when the Straw Hats found out in their time. Iceberg and even young Frankie had no intention of saying it out loud, but she wasn't exactly. Pretty fair point, I guess, Frankie said with a shrug. Anyway, Frankie, are you going to introduce the rest of your crew to us? I'd like to hear the story behind that skeleton there, Tom said. Said skeleton stepped forward with a bow. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Tom. I am Dead Bones Brook, also called Humming Brook and Soul King Brook, musician of the Straw Hat Pirates. His appearance is thanks to the revive fruit, said the blonde man. He and his crew sailed the Grand Line years before Roger, but they were massacred in the Florian Triangle. Brook's soul took a year to find its way back to his body, and this is what happened. Wait a second, Brook is there right now in this time, and this is before Moria and Thriller Bark showed up, said Luffy, a massive grin lighting up his face. Seeing him so happy now was a little unnerving for young Frankie. How could anyone with a smile that big be so scary? Now that I think about it, you're right. Hey, Tom, Frankie asked, looking back at the fishman. Brook's crew was killed 42 years ago. Since then, he's been drifting in the Florian Triangle alone. P for rescuing him? Tom's workers seemed horrified at the idea of someone spending that much time alone, and that seemed to be enough to get rid of any reservations they had. We'll have him out of that nightmare in a month, Kokura affirmed. In that case, you may want to inform the present-time Straw Hat Pirates, when that time comes, that they'll want to arm themselves with a great deal of salt before they leave this island, Brook said. Salt? Iceberg and Frankie asked. You'll find out, Brook said enigmatically. We seem to be helping ourselves out a lot more than we intended at first. Perhaps we should just prepare hockey and 6 powers manuals for everyone we meet as we go back, Robin suggested. Nah, no point in making things too easy on us. But that reminds me, Frankie said. He turned away, and sounds of metal moving reached everyone's ears. When he turned back, he had a thick stack of sheets in his hands, which he handed to his younger self. The front page was labeled, BF-38. You don't need to become a cyborg like I have, but if you want to, those are the blueprints. You can have the power to destroy a sea king in your hands whenever you want, and there's no risk of anyone stealing it. Young Frankie flipped over the first page, revealing a full body picture of his future self, massive metal shoulders, arms, and hands. Legs that were half metal, half flesh, and an open floral shirt and Speedo as his only clothing. Oh, come on, out of all the bad traits you have now, the one you don't outgrow is being a pervert, Iceberg said exasperatedly, looking at the blueprints along with Frankie. No need for flattery, Iceberg, older Frankie said sincerely, causing most of those present to sweat drop. Tom and Luffy simply laughed, and young Frankie pushed those thoughts aside as he looked through the blueprints. It's awesome, sure, but I'm not sure I want to make this huge of a change to myself, he said, clearly conflicted. I figured. Like I said, if you decide you want to, the blueprints are right there. Young Frankie nodded, setting them safely aside on a desk. The conversation proceeded for the better part of the next half hour. The story of Eni's lobby and many other adventures that they would have dancing through Frankie's mind. Iceberg was taking notes as he listened, particularly about the CP9 agents and their powers. If he became mayor, he wanted to know what to look out for. Frankie, meanwhile, listened carefully to the words about the family he would make from the island's rejects, pondering over what he could do about that. The thought of being a cyborg came back to his mind several times, but he still had difficulty making his choice. Of course, that may have had something to do with the fact that he was taking in the stories of adventures that he would be sharing with a rubber man, a swordsman with 3 swords, a weather witch, a liar and sniper, a chef with legs of iron, a reindeer doctor, Nico Robin, a living skeleton that he was going to meet sooner than later, and an ex-warlord. Even Iceberg couldn't deny that that was awesome. But Tom's workers listened with a sense of particular pride as Frankie talked about the Thousand Sunny, his dream ship that Iceberg himself had helped build and, Frankie grudgingly admitted, had named. A glint showed in his eye that gave the impression that young Frankie would never live that down, but his congratulations were obviously sincere. "So, you fulfilled your dreams?" Tom asked. "Every one of them. And now that I've managed to save you, my only regret is not being able to be with you in my time," Frankie replied, smiling a bit sadly. Tom returned the smile. "I am proud of you, Frankie, and I know I couldn't have been prouder if I saw you live out your dreams in your time. Just remember that for anything else you do from now on," he began. "Do it with gusto," he finished, in unison with Frankie and a handful of others in the building. They shared a laugh, and then the room erupted in light. Tom understood at once. "Take care of yourself, Frankie," he said. The two shared another embrace before the cyborg looked to his younger self one more time. "Frankie, whatever you decide, make sure that in 8 years, you'll be ready to join the Straw Hat Pirates. If your dream ship sails under Luffy's Jolly Roger, there'll be no chance of not making it to Raftel and beyond. And whatever you do, make sure that you grow up to be." He rolled his arms together before striking his signature pose, along with several others on the crew. "Super," young Frankie grinned even as Iceberg facepalmed. And in the next second, the light was gone, and the pirates with it.